Hey there, Power Platform enthusiasts. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Steph, that's Super Floof and Baby Floof, and we're excited to have you join us for part 4 of our PowerApps Modern Controls series. Today we're taking things up a notch as we dive into multi-stage approvals using Power Automate. In part 3, we mastered the art of gallery filtering and sorting using Modern Controls, with a special focus on the new built-in icons for modern buttons. Now it's time to bring your Power Apps to life with a robust approval process. In this video, we're going to walk you through setting up multi-stage approvals to ensure your submissions are reviewed and approved efficiently, no matter how complex your workflow is. And for fun, we're going to save time by leveraging Copilot to build the bones of our flow. We'll also be using the new designer to make the process even more smooth. By the end of this video, you'll have a fully functional multi-stage approval process integrated into your Power App, making it even more powerful and user-friendly. As always, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. And if you're looking for the full download files and more exclusive content, consider joining our channel. Links are in the description below. Let's get started and take your Power App skills to the next level. Confession time. Leveraging Copilot to create your Power App for you can cause problems. I forgot to say in my prompt that instead of approvals, I wanted a start and wait for an approval process action. You can't change that once you've already done it. So here's the revised prompt. So when a new item is created in a SharePoint list, I need an acknowledgement email sent to the author, and then I need a to start and wait for approval processes. Very different use case. I will get caught up about halfway through the video. Sorry for it. Just remember, you want to start and wait for an approval, not what you see in the next little clip about an approval process. I promise you we'll get caught up here in a minute. Here we are at make.powerautomate.com. You can always just go to flow.microsoft.com and that'll redirect you here. It's easier to type. And for fun today, we're going to enter a prompt into Copilot. When a new item is created in a SharePoint list, I need an acknowledgement email sent to the author, and then I need a two-stage approval process. We're going to hit generate and look what it built for us. Exactly what we're looking for. When an item is created in SharePoint that's coming from Power Apps, we want to send an email and then start the approval process. If we look back at our original app, we have 2 stages for the approval process. We have the HR first stage approval and then the oversight committee approval as well. So we definitely need 2 approvals distinct from each other. So back to Copilot and Power Automate. Let's go ahead and hit next. It's going to connect to everything, make sure that this is able to do everything that we're wanting it to. Now, in a good best practice, what you should leverage here are service accounts. I will do a complete video on that if people are interested, but a service account should be what you use for this. You can always transfer ownership to a service account in the future. It's just good practice to start with one. I'm going to click Create a Flow, and here we are in the new designer. The new designer has Copilot built into it, so we can come over here and ask it things. But first, click on Invalid Parameters for when an item is created. It needs to know where we're creating this. So I'm going to select my Sky Ranch dev tenant, and then the list name is going to be Flight Deck Submissions. Now, when an item is created, I like to always send an acknowledgement email. End users don't always trust technology, and if they don't get some physical acknowledgement that what they submitted has been received, then they may submit 2 or 3 more. Not what we want. Copilot very helpfully put the to in the email for me from our description. It's sending it to the person who was the author of the initial submission. I put in a subject line that's relevant. We're acknowledging what they submitted and giving them the title. Let's make it pointed to them as well. So we're going to add a greeting. If I click on the FX here, this gives us the dynamic content that we're looking for. And if I search here, we can go to created by display name and hit add, and then a comma. That'll give them an acknowledgement with their name. Makes it a little more personal. Then we have some text in here. Let's put a return in there. We give them a way to contact HR if anything is incorrect. And then we have a deep link here. I have done a previous video on deep linking. If you look at my channel, you'll see it. I can put the link to it here as well, I think. And then I always put in a blurb at the bottom saying this is an automated email. It doesn't really do anything, but it does give you plausible deniability. If someone comes back and complains that they replied and no one got back to them, well, in the email, it specifically says this is automated. There's nobody watching this email box. So that's just something that, in my personal experience, has been very helpful. Okay, let's get into the meat and potatoes of creating an approval. The only constant is the speed of change anymore, and Microsoft loves to prove that to us. They've rolled out a new Power Automate approval process called Sequential. Now, if you have two people that need to approve something, you can set a sequential approval, and it'll go to the first person, and then the second person, and then the third person in order in one approval step. We're not going to do that today. Let me know in the comments if you want me to. But what we're going to do is an approve, reject, first to respond. And the reason for that is because we have two different groups, right? We have the HR and then the intranet committee that need to approve this. So it's going to be first to respond because there are multiple people in both of these groups. So let me fill this out a little bit. I've given it a title similar to what the end user receives in their acknowledgement email. And then for this use case, I've assigned it to myself and to someone else in my dev tenant. I've added some details in here. Let's go over these really quick. If you're in a large organization, you might have 4 John Smiths there. So I always like to do a created by display name. And if I hover over it, you can see the trigger body. And then in parens, I always like to put the email. You only have one email account in a tenant, so this always ensures that you're talking about the right person. For this use case, we have a priority value and they've requested it. And then the item link is going to be a deep link back to our app. You can watch my previous video about deep linking, and then the text here. Now, one of the things I love about the new designer is if I right click and copy the action, I can come right here and paste an action. The second approval we want to be pretty similar to the first. I'm going to delete this one. And now we have the body built out for us. I have the first to respond, everything's the same, but it's going to a different group. Now we do need to do some things in between here. So let's get started on capturing the user comments and what we do if users approve or reject. Well, here's some real live troubleshooting for y'all. So I was going to submit a flight deck submission so I could show you the approval emails that come through, and this is what I get. So let's look at troubleshooting this together. If we look at the bad request, action send an email failed because the to parameter cannot be empty. Well, what does that mean? We saw that there was a to parameter in there. So let's go ahead and click edit on the flow and click back on here. For some reason, it is not liking what Copilot put into the to. So let's delete that and try it again. I'm going to add dynamic content created by email. That looks a little different. Let's save. And you'll notice that I did rename it. You rename your flows, and this really needs to become best practice because otherwise the names that are crazy will really confuse you. I have renamed it, and you just name it by clicking in here and changing it. It's not super intuitive, but I've renamed it, I've saved it. Now let's test it again. So I'm going to hit test. And automatically with a recently failed trigger, we have success on this step, and we're waiting for the rest. Forbidden. Well, what does forbidden mean? Let's look at edit again. Now, if we look here, who are we sending from? Copilot put your@email.com in there. Not useful at all. So I've deleted that. Let's test it again. You'll notice I did not hit save. If I click automatically with a recently used trigger, it gives me the opportunity to save and test. Saves a mouse click. You'll see the previous test is still running. I'm not sure why that is, but this time it worked. So Copilot is still in dev. So keep that in mind when you're doing these. Now let's look at the email that comes in when we create an approval, because we have to do the conditions now in between these two approval steps. They both came through at the same time. That's not what we want. We want the first one to either be approved or rejected, and then something happened. So let's get into that next. Here's our finished Power App again. We have a status that we have to capture, and then we have HR comments and oversight committee comments. Now in the Microsoft built-in approval, this is the email that we just built and then just arrived. When the two users, and I got one and the other user got one as well, when one of them clicks approve or reject, we have the opportunity to do comments in there. So if I do approve this, this is good to go. We need to capture that it was approved, who approved it, when they approved it, and hit submit, because there are two people or multiple people in the group that could be approving these. Now, when this user hits approve, be it me or whoever, you'll see how the body of the email changes. It changes for everybody who's gotten that email. That's the power of the built-in approval workflow, is that once someone does it, everyone who's in the loop for that approval sees that it has been completed and the comments, either approved or reject. Let's add the logic in there to capture that information and then proceed to the next approval stage. As they say, back to our regularly scheduled program. I have the flow now with 2 start and wait for approvals. Why that's important is if you go to add an action, we're going to add a control for a condition. And what we're looking for here is the outcome of our approval. That's not an option if you use just a start and approval, because it's not waiting for anything, so there's no outcome. Okay, so now that we have outcome, we want to set that to does not contain reject. Now I know that's a little bit counterintuitive, but this is like a negative positive. If the outcome is anything but reject, then it has to be approved. So if you leverage in your flow something custom, right? If you just get in the habit of saying outcome does not contain reject, you're going to set yourself up for long-term success. So now that we do that, okay, someone's not rejected it, right? So the true for that is going to be it's been approved. What do we want to capture here? We want to capture the comments that the approver gave, who the approver was, and what time they did it. So we're going to have to leverage a variable for that if we want the text to look nice. When you initialize a variable, it has to be at the start of your flow. So I'm going to go here and go to add an action. I'm going to look for variable. I don't want to increment. I have to click on see more. I want to initialize a variable. Before you can use it, you have to create it, and that's what initializing is. var HR comments. Now, one of the things that I like to do is I'm going to copy that and then go to string, because this is going to be a string. But here in the actual step, I like to keep what the step is and then add the comments. So this initialized variable is for HR comments. While we're here, let's add another one for the oversight committee. I could go back in like I was about to do here, but I can also copy action and from right here, paste an action. And it's going to give me oversight comments. Copy that and change the name. So now we have, and again, I want to be consistent, so let's do that. Now we have our 2 variables initialized. So we're just going to wash, rinse, repeat here. So we're starting and waiting for an approval. And if the condition does not contain reject, so if it does not contain reject, what do we do here? We are going to set a variable. And I could type in set variable, but it usually pulls up a whole bunch of other things. I like to start with variable, but here we have set variable. Which variable are we going to set? This is going to be var HR comments. So we're going to say var HR comments. And what are we going to capture here? What we're going to capture here is the approved by, and then we go to the dynamic content and start and wait for approval. We have all of these items in here. I want to see more. Now I could leverage response summary. Now response summary will give you a lot of really good information, but it's not going to give it to you in a format that you can set, right? Let's look at here. This is an example of what content you would get from response summary. You can't control it. This is just how it's going to look. Approver, Steph Marshall, response approve, request date, response date, but it doesn't tell you what the comments are. So we could leverage that and put it in here, right? We could remove what I have in there and then go to dynamic content, response summary, because we're creating the variable. Then we could do this, right? Comments, if any, right? And then go back to our FX, dynamic content. I want to see more. And then we scroll down. Response comments. Now look what happened when I did that. Power Automate automatically put it in a for each loop for me, which is handy if we had multiple approvers. We don't here, but it's just what it does, so you just have to live with it. Now I'm going to hit save. And what we want to do after that is come back down here, and we're going to add an action because we want to change the status of the item, and we want to put those comments into the item so that it's visible for everybody. So we go into add an action, update item. It's a SharePoint action. And what are we updating? Give me just a sec. I've selected my site address, my list name, and now the ID, we want it to be a dynamic content, and I can search for ID here. And we want it to be the ID of when the item is created. So that's going to go in and get the item that we created. And now with the new modern experience, new designer, I can see the status here, but what else do you want to do? I can either come in and hunt and peck like that, or I could see show all. But what I want to do is change the status from submitted to now it's pending oversight committee, and the HR comments are going to be our variable HR comments, and click add. So now what we've done is if it's approved, if it's anything but reject, we're setting it to the response summary, which tells us approver such and such. And you know what we're going to do in here? We're going to say approved. And then I'm going to do a hard return for the response summary, a hard return for the comments. So we're taking that, that's what's going to be our variable, and then we're updating the item with that. So it's the status is pending oversight committee review, which means that HR has approved it. But if it's false, right, what do we want to do? Let's go here and copy the entire action, paste an action. And what we're going to do instead is say rejected. I'm going to get rid of the exclamation mark because that just seems rude. Rejected. And then we're going to update the item. I'm going to copy this action too. I'm going to bring it over here, paste it. And we're going to say instead rejected. We're going to capture the comments. And then if it's rejected, we want to add an action here. We want to notify the person that submitted it, right? We want to let them know that their submission has been rejected. So I'm going to send them an email. We have to click on switch to advanced mode. And then from here, we want to go to dynamic content created by email address. Let them know what happened. Give me a second. Okay, here we have the draft email. We give them a greeting. We have some text. Again, you could have whatever you want in there. And then we're appending the comments right into the item. So let's test this and see what it looks like. I'm going to hit test. I'm going to do it automatically with one that I've already started. Save and test. That's one of the nice things is we don't have to hit save. So we have an error. What do we have an error at? The comments here. I like to leave my errors in my videos because you might run into this. And if you do, it's helpful to see how someone else troubleshoots it. So we have dynamic content in a for each loop that's giving us an error. So what we're going to do instead is just delete this. Delete. And we're going to grab this. We're going to copy it just for reference. And right here, I'm going to add an action. Variable. I'm going to set a variable. Which variable am I going to set? I'm going to do the HR comments just like we did before. I'm going to paste, but I'm going to pull this one out. These two guys. I'm going to then replace them with the dynamic content once more. Should be the same thing. The response summary. And then we go back to FX. Comments. Response comments, which will put it into its own for each loop. I'm going to save. And let's test it again. Test automatically with the one that's running. Let's see what we get this time. Okay, we're getting one on this same one for some reason. Oh, because the variable name is the same. So if we come into here, set variable HR comments is the same as this one here. So let's set variable HR comments rejected. And let's set this one to approved. And let's test it again. Automatically, recently used trigger, test running, save and test. And it's running. So let's see what we have. You hear the ding. I got the acknowledgement email. Let me scroll up so you can see that in the new one, it gives us the little check marks and how long it's taken. So we're waiting on our approval here. Here we have the approval email. Just for funsies, let's reject it. Sorry, this is not complete. Please resubmit at a later time. Hit submit. You see how the body of the email changes. It changed for everybody. And what happens here in the approval? Look at this. It's showing us that it was rejected. It's setting the variable. If I click on this, it shows us what we have here, the settings, the code view, about, gives us some details about it. And then it says that it's updated. So let's go look, and it sent the rejected email. So let's look at that first. Here we have the rejected email. Thank you for your submission. Look at this though, approved. This is why you always want to test using just yourself as first, because this says approved. That's not right. We want that to be rejected, right? The response here, reject request date, it gives us some of the comments, if any. Sorry, this is not complete. So let's go back in and edit. We forgot to change this after we did it before, rejected. So save that. This is how you troubleshoot. I like to show in my videos real life troubleshooting stuff. So now let me pull up the app and let's look at it. Here we are in our app. I'm going to filter by status, rejected. And here we have it in a rejected status. If we go into it and we look at the status is rejected, remember we had to change that, but we haven't kicked off the flow again. But here we have all the details here. Now we just have to wash, rinse, repeat for the oversight committee. Easy, very easy. Now, one other thing, if you want in your Power Automate to switch back and forth between the two designers, you absolutely can. Let's look at the Power Automate in the old designer just for reference. Here we have when the item is created, var comments, var oversight committee. Here's our email that we sent. Here we have the start and wait for approval. Very different look and feel. Our condition, the outcome does not contain reject. Here we have our for each loops. If we have it approved, our for each loop, if it's rejected, and then we're updating the items. And if it's rejected, then we're sending the email. And one other thing we need to do here, add an action. We want to terminate the flow. It's canceled. Well, we don't want it to be canceled. It succeeded, but we don't want it to go on. So if we were to save this, now when this flow goes, if it's rejected, it's just going to terminate at this step. It's not going to go on to the next level of approval, which is exactly what we want. If HR says this isn't appropriate, we don't want to bother the oversight committee with it, right? It needs to go back to the submitter. They need to take into account our comments and then resubmit if appropriate. Now we could build this out even more detailed if we wanted to send it back to the submitter with a deep link. They could go in and make a change to their request. And once they submit their change for reapproval, this could kick off again. But we're not going to do that. And this one is just if it fails, it's just canceled and they have to resubmit it. Depends on your use case. Let me know in the comments if you would like me to do the more in-depth workflow and we can do that. If you found this tutorial helpful, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Let us know your thoughts, questions, and any topics you'd like us to cover in future videos. Sharing is caring, so don't forget to share this tutorial with your fellow Power Apps enthusiasts. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep rocking Power Apps like a true pro. See you in the next video.